All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're here today with Dr. David Duizer, and we're speaking about decoding hormones, strategic lab testing in perimenopause and menopause. So I'm going to leave him to talk a bit about that. My name is Theodore. I'm a program advisor here at IHN and the manager of our self-paced program. And let me just tell you a bit about Dr. David before we begin, and he kind of kicks it off. Actually, um, before I do that, let me just maybe mention the structure for today. So I'll introduce Dr. David, then he will talk about his wonderful topic for the day, and then there'll be an FAQ period. And then we actually have a fantastic giveaway that Dr. David has been so generous to offer. And that is basically so it'll be for two people, two 30-minute, one session for two people. There we go. 30-minute one-on-one consultation sessions with Dr. David intended to support you as an active practitioner navigating complex client cases. So what we're going to do is after the Q&A is done, we'll do the draw and have those two lucky winners. So make sure to stick around for that. Okay, so to introduce Dr. David. So Dr. David introduces, or Dr. Duizer, I think maybe that's more appropriate, teaches understanding lab diagnostics in clinical practice here at IHN, which is one of our continuing education courses. And he earned his Bachelor of Science from the Royal Military College of Canada through the regular officer training program back in 2008. And he graduated from the Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine in 2014. So currently, he serves as chair of the board of governors of the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine, CCNM, for anyone who's familiar with it. And he's based in Vancouver and is the co-owner of Noble Naturopathic, where he runs a private practice focused on integrative chronic disease management. And he also hosts a weekly podcast called Personalized by Vitamin Lab, which has some fantastic information on there. So I know we can't all see each other, but let's give Dr. David Duizer a warm welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Theo. That's really kind. I'm just going to share my screen so I can get to talking about my stuff here. Let's go for it. Welcome, everyone. I'm really grateful you're here. There was so much interest in this session. And this is the thing about listening to your people. We kind of polled the audience, like what would be a great topic to introduce the idea of functional lab testing to the community. And this was the topic that came up, and we had an excellent turnout for people signing up to attend today. And there's so many of you here, so I'm really, really grateful that you're here. I'm sorry that I can't see you and we can't talk face to face, but I hope you get lots out of this. And if you have further questions that I'm not covering here or don't have time for today, reach out anytime. I'm quite accessible via email and social media and phone and everything like that. So today is called Decoding Hormones, Strategic Lab Testing in Perimenopause and Menopause, a Functional Medicine Approach. Basically, we're going to go over what a holistic approach might look like for the lab tests that can be done in these two kind of phases of life and how useful they can be, how they're done, and what kind of the results look like when we do them. Like Theo said, I teach lab diagnostics, so this is kind of a snippet from the hormone part of the course. Um, it's a really cool course. You get to spend hours and hours chatting with people who are as interested in labs and as being part of a functional team as you might be. Actually, there's a few reasons people join the course. They join because they're part of a team and they want to talk the talk. So basically, to be able to communicate about cases with their colleagues, it's helpful to have some exposure to all the labs that are possible. That's what we do. We try to expose everyone to as many labs as we can possibly fit into the 8 sessions. We also have a lot of people who are coming to support because they have lots of cases where they want to go above and beyond. So we talk about what labs holistic nutritionists can sign up for, and then how to use them clinically, and how to program, how to use them. We don't go into treatments, but we go into when are they useful and what do they mean. And it's really, really helpful. People dealing with a lot of really difficult cases, because I'm sure people come see people like you and I when they can't get answers from the conventional side. And then we have people coming out of interest and to further their career because they want to be the best that they can possibly be for both themselves and their family and their clients. And it's a really good reason to do the course as well. The course is really fun. We cover every possible lab that a person could see in a functional practice. And we have great discussions, and there's usually a really great crowd that joins. So if you have questions, if you want to join, reach out to IHN. And thank you to IHN for hosting me all these years. I've done this course many, many, many times. I wonder how many times, probably 10 times now. Big thank you to IHN for having me back every 6 months to teach this one. We already went through my bio. You don't need to know more about me. If you want to follow me, go on Instagram or follow my podcast. Today, we're talking about the phases of hormonal change, key labs in midlife, and functional interpretations of results. We'll go through how and when to test, the timing and the methods, nutrition and lifestyle connections. We won't go over full treatments, but just like where there's some connections, some common patterns, and go over a couple cases. I don't have a clock on me, so I can't really see where I am. Usually I have a phone beside me, but I don't. Actually, I do have an iPad that I could be using. We'll put that there so I can know how close I am. Okay, so the phases of hormonal change. We've got the reproductive years, then we've got perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And today we're talking about perimenopause and menopause. And perimenopause is kind of that a bit more of a chaotic time. And it's a bit more chaotic because there's fluctuating levels of hormones. There's fluctuating estrogen and generally declining progesterone. Some people a little quicker, some people a little slower. And what this can do is it can change the way the cycle has been. So a person could have decades of a very consistent menstrual cycle, and then all of a sudden things should shift. And it could be a little shorter, could be a little longer. And the symptoms could change. So for example, a person who didn't have premenstrual symptoms could then develop premenstrual symptoms. And someone who had premenstrual symptoms for a long time, they might go away during the perimenopausal time. Also, some menopausal symptoms can start to creep up depending on how low the hormones go. For example, hot flashes, night sweats, they can start to creep in. With that, a bunch of other changes in physiology that might be disruptive to optimal wellness. And we're going to go over today how to assess for all of these so that we can help a person feel their absolute best through this really, really important and cool time of life, to be honest. We can't look at phases of life as being really bad or good per se. There's benefits to be had throughout this time. Like, for example, for some people, libido goes up at this time. For other people, when their cycle has been a significant burden for a few years because maybe endometriosis or PCOS, it can be quite a positive time in perimenopause and the menopausal transition. And then we have menopause, where estrogen and progesterone are both very low, and the adrenals have to be then supportive, kind of like forever. And so we have to think deeply about the adrenals and the connections between the other hormones and the adrenals, and the nutrient status in the adrenals, and lifestyle in the adrenals, and habit formation, exercise, nutritional status, everything, and the adrenals. A really, really important time. And then the other stage will be the postmenopausal stage, and that's really where there's been menopause for a few years. You could set a time of, say, 5 to 10 years later. You could call it postmenopause. The perimenopausal time, the transition time, can last anywhere from 2 to 8 years. And so there's a huge amount of variability. You know this with your friends and family and maybe yourself, that some people it's literally 2 years. Cycle starts to change, 2 years later, no period. Whereas other people, it can go on from, early 40s all the way to still having a period once in a while around 50. And so lots and lots of variability. Not saying anything is bad nor good, but tons of variability around the hormones at this time of life. Case number one. Let's make it a little more interesting. Here's the quote. Every month is different. Some months my cycle's 14 days, others it's 35. So there's been some change from a 28-day typical cycle to this more erratic type cycle. Now, what I put there in the bottom right was the typical hormones that we're looking at when we're thinking about the female hormone cycle and what they're like in a typical 28-day cycle. And then on the left there, I wrote, consider the holistic approach to hormone assessment. And I see that as testing all of the hormones as being quite holistic, because it gives you a whole picture of what's going on. So just to review, in a typical 28-day cycle, we have the two hormones coming from the brain, FSH and LH. They are rising up mid-cycle with an LH peak at day 14 and then coming back down to low. And we have the estrogen and progesterone going through these two phases. In the first half of the cycle, we call it the follicular phase. Do I have my little note thing here? I could annotate. This is what I do during the course. This is like a live thing. I've got my mouse here. In the first half of the cycle, we have a bit of an estrogen bump. We do not have a progesterone bump. That's the green one. It stays low. Second half of the cycle, we get a double bump. We get both progesterone and we get estrogen. And the ratio right here, day 21, day 19 to 22, we could say is quite important in the second half of the cycle because we want them to be peaking right here, peaking together, and then coming down nicely together. And that's how the 28-day cycle goes. So, but why change? Why would it then say go to 14 days or for others, or even within the same person, switch to a 35-day month? Well, it's because of the fluctuation in the level of these peaks. And so if, for example, progesterone is declining and we're not getting as much of a peak, and estrogen in relatively is also lower, then they could be coming down a little bit earlier, say day 24, day 26, or even earlier than that, signaling menses. And then alternatively, they could be imbalanced. So estrogen could be maintained quite strongly, whereas progesterone could be low, which is a type of estrogen dominance that we're going to get into. Now, it's the estrogen lowering that's going to be driving a lot of the Menzi trigger, and the estrogen could last a little bit longer, delaying out the length of the month. And that's how the changes occur. And what we see is this shift in LH and FSH where they can be a little bit higher for longer. So we'll go over that in just a second. I put the reference ranges into the slideshow. Same case. Some symptoms that can be occurring when the cycle changes. Irregularity, of course, that's the cycle change. Short, missed, heavier, or lighter cycles. Worsening premenstrual symptoms like mood swings, irritability, could be digestive disruption, sleep disruption, and anxiety. That can come with hot flashes or without. Cravings, appetite dysregulation. Typically, sugar cravings are quite common in PMS, premenstrual syndrome, and in perimenopause. I guess I could say in perimenopause. Weight gain, especially central weight gain. We'll talk about the cortisol connection in a little bit. Breast tenderness, headaches, libido changes. We're going to talk about estrogen dominance and the role of testosterone at this time of life. Vaginal dryness can occur, hot flashes and night sweats, some issues with focus and concentration due to the fluctuating hormones. So this is the luteinizing hormone and the follicular stimulating hormone or follicle stimulating hormone. So LH, we saw that big LH surge mid-cycle. So mid-cycle peak, you can see that the reference range is 19 to 103. Whereas in the first half of the cycle, day 1 to 14, it's 2 to 10. Second half, 1 to 12. And so this is a very conventional test for perimenopause because it'll be done on day 3 of menses. And what they'll be looking for is the LH to be kind of within this mid-follicular spot between 2 and 10. What if it's above 10? If it's above 10, then you can see this postmenopausal range down here, 10 to 58. Then you could say the body thinks that it's still mid-cycle and it's trying to tell the ovaries to work. And so they're looking to say, okay, in the follicular phase, is it actually above 10? Because that means the brain signal is stronger. And there's a negative feedback loop that occurs when estrogen, progesterone at a certain level. They'll tell the brain, just like with thyroid hormone, I'm sure you've learned about how when thyroid hormone is at a certain level, it tells the brain to slow down on the TSH production. Same thing with LH and FSH with estrogen, progesterone. Negative feedback to the brain, dialing down the signal. So mid-follicular, we're looking for, if it's elevated, yes. We're looking down to this postmenopausal range. You'll see that test a lot. Same thing with FSH on day 3, mid-follicular, again, 4 to 8, 3.9 to 8.8. If it's above 16, okay, we know it's not supposed to be that high from day 1 to 14. There is a signal that's trying to be made to the tissues from the brain, and that's because of this a cycle change or a change in the actual hormone levels. A good indication the hormone levels are not where they're expected to be, given the fact that the person believes they're on day 3. Case 2, person hasn't had cycle in a year and the hot flashes are keeping them up at night. This is like one of the most common things you'll see in clinical practice for everyone, both in integrative functional medicine and for in nutritional care. Hot flashes are incredibly common. And what is occurring at that time is FSH is elevated, like I just said in the previous one, but it's consistently elevated. It's consistently here between 16 and 113. FSH is up, and correspondingly, the estrogen is low. And that has caused there to be no cycle in 1 year, and we call that menopause. So that's how we know. So anytime there's multiple cycles within a year, it's still perimenopause. And as soon as there's been a year with no cycle, no menses, then we call that menopause. And FSH is typically chronically elevated at that time. So FSH really helpful as a marker to know about the status. And you can see that it's pretty flat. Once it's there, it's pretty flat. And this kind of blue range here is where you can see it creeping up and up and up and up. And what happens while it's creeping up and up and up is there'll be signs of cycles. So this could happen between an FSH and LH of 10 to 60, 16 to 113. They could still be, 20, 30, having a cycle. And that's totally normal until all of a sudden 12 are missed. Then we call it menopause. The vasomotor symptoms are the big one. It's the hot flashes and the night sweats, but also occurring around this time, and why our support can be so valuable is the cognitive aspect, the brain fog, the memory changes, not just due to lack of sleep, not just due to not having a good quality of sleep, but also related to actually having low levels of estrogen and progesterone. The metabolic aspects. We talked a little bit about some weight gain, especially central adiposity and perimenopause, but more weight gain in menopause. Typically 15 pounds or so, if not managed by someone like you or me. Slower metabolism. Metabolism declines 1% per year after the age of 40, but it's typically a little bit due to hormones, a little bit due to muscle loss. But the thing is, the hormones play a big role in muscle maintenance. The other piece of this is the carbohydrate control, the insulin regulation. So this poor glucose control occurs. It's usually a touch of insulin resistance because estrogen plays a big role in insulin sensitivity, staying sensitive to carbohydrate and using them effectively for fuel. And so it's this subtle bump in insulin. That's why people are benefiting so much from managing their carbohydrate intake as during the menopausal transition, changing from a bit of a higher carb to a bit of a lower carb, higher protein. During this time, you're seeing millions and millions of people talking about this online, people making that change and experiencing great benefits. It's probably because of the glucose control and the better insulin sensitivity from making that switch. It's a relevant thing to do. Then we have the structural aspect. So structural aspect is the bone loss, the sarcopenia, the muscle loss, a bit of skin thinning, and a bit of hair loss. So I think of this as like eyes, ears, skin, hair, bone, and muscle. And that's because of the collagen production changes. Estrogen is very important for the production of collagen. It's a signal for collagen production. You can take collagen or the amino acids that would then come from a collagen or a protein powder, but to put them back together, a person has to have a level of estrogen as a signal, an appropriate level of estrogen as a signal. So estrogen can be very, very helpful for supporting these tissues, both collagen, muscle, tendon, ligament, because of that. So structural aspect. Then we have the urogenital aspect. We talked a little bit about vaginal dryness in the perimenopausal section, but there's also some weakness in the tissue causing incontinence to be watching out for. And then with the vaginal dryness and some change in the terrain, there can be a higher risk of recurrent UTIs, where in fact supporting the estrogen level can be quite preventative against the recurrent UTIs if they are occurring. And then we have the other one, which is on the metabolic side. I don't have it as a bullet point, but the cardiovascular and the brain risk. So basically, high estrogen and low estrogen are both bad for the heart and brain. And so we don't want to have an estrogen level that's way, way, way below the range, because then we're not getting collagen production in the vasculature. The vasculature is also always turning over, just like our muscles are, just like our skin is. And so if we're experiencing, say, for example, vaginal dryness or really dry skin or visibly aging skin or a lack of muscle mass or bone loss, the exact same thing is happening in the cardiovascular system, which of course supplies the brain with oxygen. And so we can't miss out on that one. There's this, turn away from bioidentical hormones since the Women's Health Initiative, but people turning back to them now because we know about the longevity benefit of having a normal estrogen forever. So I like that. I like the preventative aspect of all of this. So let's define them. Perimenopause, hormone fluctuation irregularity that is occurring for 2 to 8 years before a period of 12 months of no cycle. 12 months of no cycle, we'll call it menopause. Not that the terms make a huge difference. Who cares what we call them? What we need to know, because you can use both groups of tests in both scenarios, but having some definition improves our communication, I think, with our clients. Just to be able to say, okay, you're here. Some people really like that. Some people hate that, right? They hate terms. So to be labeled, of course. And I'm totally with you. I was like, forget the label. Let's just go with the functionally. Here's where you are, and functionally, here's where we could be. And if we go there, we'll get all these benefits. So we can go through these lists, like right on this benefit, we can get the functional aspect. In the perimenopausal time, if we're supportive of hormone levels, we can get the reduction of all of these, which I think is obviously conducive to feeling optimal. If it's menopause, then we're thinking about not only sleeping well now and feeling good now, but the long-term benefits of progesterone for sleep, for example, and for mood, and estrogen for collagen deposition and metabolism. And so we go through all of that and kind of set goals. And I encourage you to do the same, because so much of this can be accomplished through nutrition. When you're creating your plan, you can write down all the symptoms that they're experiencing and then set goals for each one and give yourself some time. Give yourself 3 weeks to 3 months to see some severity change. Okay, we have hot flashes and night sweats. We know that they're occurring this frequently, and the severity out of 10, 10 being absolutely miserable, hate my life, 0 being not happening at all, is this number. Well, in 3 weeks, we want it to be this. And for example, rhubarb extract is a guaranteed product for hot flashes. And if there's not a severity reduction or a frequency reduction within 4 weeks, then rhubarb extract was not the right thing for you. So like you have a defined symptoms, the ones they're coming in, and then you can add on the prevention ones, right? Like, heart, brain, muscle, metabolism, all of those things, glucose control, and set some goals for them. That's what I like to do. We've talked about LH, FSH, progesterone, and estrogen, but what other labs can we consider? There's so many other good labs that we could be doing at this time of life to help a person with these groups of symptoms. As you're looking through these, your brain is probably turning like, okay, wait a minute. Sleep disruption, anxiety. What about cortisol? What about adrenaline? What about GABA? Right? Magnesium. You're probably thinking about cravings and appetite dysregulation and the impact of serotonin and our microbiome. For weight gain, it's insulin, right? It's growth hormone. It's testosterone. For breast tenderness, it's the estrogen metabolites. We haven't talked about them yet. Libido changes, it's the entire testosterone cascade. It's the blood flow to the tissues, which can be oxidative stress measurements, right? Inflammation measurements. For vaginal dryness, it really is the estrogen. It's a key piece. Hot flashes and night sweats, estrogen and progesterone. Don't discount progesterone. Big study on progesterone for hot flashes, showing benefit. Focus and concentration. You might be thinking nutrient levels. What about CoQ10, right? What about L-carnitine, B vitamins? So there's lots of pieces. And on the whole list, you could throw thyroid in there as being the master regulator of metabolism. There's lots of functional pieces I'm sure you're probably putting together here. When it comes to cognitive brain health, you're probably thinking about serotonin. What about neurotoxins and the role of phthalates and parabens? And what about dopamine, for example? What about inflammatory markers impacting the brain? What about quality and quantity sleep scores using smartwatches? For metabolic, what about continuous glucose monitors and measuring the swings of blood sugar with the the diet that a person is consuming. For structural, what about a DEXA scan or more advanced bone scans that are available at conventional labs to see bone turnover scores? For urogenital, what about bacteria tests for urinary tract infections? In fact, functional bacterial tests not done at conventional labs. There are so many tests that can be done. I've just given you a 2 minute snapshot of some labs that we cover in our course. Like it's a lot, right? 3 hours every week for 8 weeks, where we cover all the possible things that can be done. Not to be an expert in any one test, although people do choose to do that. They'll say, okay, I am going to be the nutritionist who knows more about the Dutch test than everyone else. And they will like tune into that session and ask me questions and we'll communicate offline. And that's their thing. Most people are there to get up to speed on 200 tests. I should like literally count how many tests we cover so that we can say, okay, these are all the things. And this is not also such that you could sit in front of a client and rattle off all the tests that could be done. You know, hey, when you come see me, it's $2,000, so we can do all these tests and make this big. No, what we do is we get familiar with all the tests so that we can make the most evidence-based recommendation for them to support both symptom reduction on one side. Lowest cost approach would be this to get this symptom change. Maybe it's not even that they need a test. Maybe it's just knowing where the hormones are typically at this time and knowing how to treat. Or maybe it's optimal programming, which is what a lot of people like to see. Okay, what would it cost? What would it be like? What would be the work that I'd have to put in to do all the things you think I should be doing to have the best possible health a person like me could have? And I love being there. Of course, I love that. So I like to present both plans. So in the course, we talk about, plan A could be this. This is what it's kind of like. This is a patient journey, a client journey. And plan B could be for that performance person, for that, those people who are like, wow, I'm going to be the healthiest person you've ever met after you're done working with me. Here are all the tests that could be done. Let's get into them. Let's go through some of them. So let's talk about perimenopause. So we talked about cycle day 3. Cycle day 3, LH, FSH, and E2. E2 stands for estradiol. It's 80% of all the estrogen in the female body in perimenopause. E2 estradiol. It's the main one that's tested at a conventional lab. This is a simple blood test. Cycle day 3 is a blood test. It's a nice baseline screen. Decent baseline screen. We're screening for ovarian reserve. So basically, remember how we talked about LH and FSH being the signals from the brain? Well, if FSH is elevated, well, then it means that the ovaries didn't respond when it was super elevated a few days earlier. So it's still high. So we're talking about ovarian reserve, right? Are the ovaries responding to the signal by taking us through the next phase into the luteal phase, where the follicle is then ready to produce hormones? Because those hormones tell the brain to calm down with the FSH production. Fair? Cycle regulation. If estrogen is not where you think it should be, if it's outside by the way, there's also estrogen ranges for the blood for both follicular, mid-cycle, luteal, and postmenopausal estrogen. If it's outside of the range where for day 3, for the follicular range, doesn't make any sense because they're in menses. That's why they showed up at the lab. So it doesn't make any sense. So cycle regularity with that test. And many people don't like that test because it doesn't tell us functionally a whole lot about what we should be doing. It's more for information. The information is here that your hormones are different than they were before. Not necessarily messed up, just different than they were. And so it's hard to know like how to act on that fully. Whereas a luteal phase, a day 19 to 22 progesterone, is the most naturopathic thing we do. We love that test to see if we're getting a progesterone peak at the day we expect it to be. So on a 28-day cycle, we say, okay, day 21, for example, is 21 days after the start of menses. Progesterone should be peaking. That's ideal. If the cycle's regularly longer, 3 months in a row at 30, then we just add 2 days. 3 months in a row at 26 days, we just subtract 2 days. So that we know, okay, progesterone peak should be happening midway in that luteal phase. And that's a very common time to test, either through blood, saliva, or urine. It can be done. This is revealing the luteal deficiency. Are we getting a nice progesterone peak, something that we would be expecting to have for mood support and for sleep optimization and to prevent estrogen dominance. Then we have the Dutch test, which is, of course, most of the naturopaths' favorite thing to do, the Dutch test, where we get a whole assortment of values. We'll go through some of them in a little bit. Estrogens, all three types, E1, E2, E3. E1's the most potent, E3 is the least potent, and all of their metabolites, how the liver is handling them, because those metabolites also are estrogenic. They're very estrogenic. They get reabsorbed if they don't pass with the stool, and they have an estrogen effect because they are estrogens. They're just metabolites. So we get to see all those detox pathways. We get to see the entire testosterone cascade as well. And then we have, at this time, some wildcard tests that I think are very helpful in perimenopause. I talked through 50 tests just a minute ago, but the ones I put on the page here that I like to see in perimenopause, cortisol and DHEA. Because in a couple of years, we're going to be relying on these two adrenal tests. Because what happens is some progesterone will be made by the adrenals in menopause, and we'll be making estrogen from DHEA converting into testosterone, which converts into E1, and then relying on E1 for collagen production for the next 50 years. So we need to know about the adrenals, right? Like that makes total sense. These things tend to go in the opposite direction. So high cortisol, high stress typically shows up in a state of low DHEA, which means bad news for our future estrogen levels and our future testosterone and estrogen levels and testosterone levels. So we like to test cortisol to see if it's elevated. And then the thyroid panel, just to rule out thyroid overlap. So thyroid master regulator for metabolism. If metabolism is altered, that's not favorable during that time. So this is just a little graphic to show you some of the other considerations I might make here. If there is estrogen dominance, we might have heavier cycles and get iron deficient. We don't want to have brain fog because of low estrogen, but also be iron deficient. Not ideal. We don't want to have lower metabolism because of lower estrogen and also be iron deficient, because then we can't exercise as hard. Fasting insulin, muscle mass, and electrolytes. This kind of metabolic panel, I think, does a good service here to know if we're starting to become a little bit insulin resistant so that we can prevent that 15-pound weight gain. And electrolytes, because we don't want to be dehydrated because the brain shrinks a bit in dehydration. That brain fog, the lack of sleep because of the heat is not favorable. So we want to make sure the electrolytes are stable and the water balance is stable. We talked about cortisol, DHEA, thyroid panel, and then how progesterone can be tested. In the second half of the cycle, be tested through either blood, urine, or saliva. All three can be very, very helpful. The benefit of doing urine is you can get the alpha and beta progesterones. One is more calming than the other, so you can find out genetically what's more produced. And saliva is just an easy at-home test to do in the morning. Simple. This is what the Dutch test, the new report for the Dutch test looks like. And they have menopausal range and non-menopausal range. So non-menopausal will be the green range and menopausal will be the purple range. And now what they have is optimal levels for each, which is what we go over in the course. On the left-hand side, you can see that the testosterone cascade starting at DHEA, going through testosterone, androsterone, ethylcholanolone, and the metabolites of each. And this other one, which is on the previous page, 5-alpha DHT, the most androgenic testosterone there is. We report that one. Love it. We are going to be relying on these two, DHEA and testosterone, forever in menopause. So in perimenopause, they better be good. We need to see that. And then we have the E1, E2, E3. We already talked about E2 being the most abundant, but we need to know where these land because we don't want to be in the perimenopausal stage. We don't want to be in the purple range. That's too low, right? We're catching the luteal phase. By the way, this will be a luteal assessment, day 21. We don't want to be in the purple range because it means we got a normal progesterone, but we got a low estrogen. Not ideal. Although completely normal to have fluctuating levels of hormone until all of a sudden there's no cycle. And the extent that you want to intervene to support that is very personal. And then the metabolites, turns out the red metabolite's quite toxic. That's the red slice of pie. We want to keep it less than 11%. We'll go through that in the course. Then in menopause, no cycle for 12 months. What tests would be helpful? Well, some people would do, the conventional system would do estrogen, progesterone, LH, and FSH, but you know what? They haven't had a cycle in 12 months, so they're probably all, these two are probably low, estrogen, progesterone are probably low, and LH and FSH are probably high, because that's what happens. It just confirms menopause. It doesn't tell us what to do. DHEA and testosterone, I've said it enough already. It's going to assess androgen reserve because we are going to be relying on that for our vitality, for our collagen production, because it's going to convert here through this aromatase enzyme on the dotted line into estrogens. Love that. Cortisol profile. So knowing if cortisol is high so we can be managing it because we don't want to reach a state of burnout. High cortisol for a long time is going to drive down the DHEA and eventually cortisol will be going low. And then we have to tie up all the symptoms that we covered. So we like to have a metabolic panel, cholesterol, blood sugar, insulin, average sugar over 3 months. Because metabolic risk rises when estrogen goes low. I've already mentioned that. We need to manage it. We want to make sure that a person is metabolically as healthy as possible. Thyroid panel makes a big deal because makes a big difference because we don't want to gain weight at this time. We want to keep metabolism as high as possible. And then vitamin D and other bone markers to assess for the strength of bone risk. This is just a graphic showing my most important three. Makes sense, right? Most important three. Cortisol pattern should be within the range. So on the right-hand side here, you'll see the free cortisol. We want it to be nice and normal in the morning. Midway is great. We want to double within 2 hours. This person didn't double in 2 hours. And then we want to go down just nicely, but not zero over the course of the rest of the day. That's how cortisol measurements go. The Dutch at Complete covers this, but there's lots of labs that do cortisol assessments. Saliva, urine, all good. How about interpreting? So what can we find on a test like this? Well, the conventional approach, that LH, FSH, and day 3 estrogen, can tell us if there's disease versus normal. For example, if estrogen is super duper high, but the brain hormones are still high, there's a problem. There's some condition that's driving an elevated estrogen. It's not communicating with the brain. And otherwise, it tells us about the state, the closeness to menopause, or if we have reached there. But functional is everything else we've covered. We could see estrogen dominance or low progesterone. Here are the 3 things we could catch on luteal assessments of those two. We could see high estrogen and low progesterone. So the progesterone is starting to decline, but estrogen has not become irregular just yet. That's a big form of estrogen dominance, causing heavy cycles typically in the perimenopausal time. And then we have the other type of estrogen dominance, which is normal estrogen and low progesterone. It was worth it to test because in that state, we don't want to suppress the estrogen. I did that to my sister-in-law. She had symptoms of estrogen dominance, so I gave her broccoli extracts, I3C and DIM, and it sent her into menopause, even though she was only in perimenopause. Not a good plan. That's why I like testing. People online talk about testing not being required. I'll debate that a little bit. I would debate it a little bit based on experience. And then we have the estrogen, the third estrogen dominance, which would be high estrogen, high progesterone with a steep drop or a longer drop. So if it's 35 days, but they're both high, there's been some dysregulation. Some months the LH and FSH sent the ovaries into overdrive. That's possible. And then we have adrenal dysfunction. So supporting stress hormones, adaptogens, supporting stress responses, making sure people don't get into any of the stages of adrenal fatigue. Very important at this time of life. Low testosterone, low DHEA, supporting through herbs. They can be very powerful here. And nutrition, for healthy fats, for example, antioxidants and minerals like boron can do a great job for these. And sleep support, of course, for those two. And then the thyroid interplay, making sure a person is not deficient in the main cause of hypothyroidism across the world, but not North America, which is low iodine, right? Low iodine, low tyrosine, low selenium and zinc. Those can't be happening. How and when to test? Conventional stuff, day 3, usually blood. Menopause, any time in the month. If the person hasn't had a cycle in 12 months, they can test whenever. Serum levels, blood levels are typically taken conventionally as baselines. Saliva is great for circadian rhythm because it can just be measured first thing in the morning within 10 minutes of waking. They can just roll over and spit in the jar when the hormones are typically peaking. Dutch test is our favorite for all the metabolic pathways that we went through to determine all the levels, as much data as possible, because I'm a data guy, and the detox of those hormones. The one caveat is when there's irregular testing, we then have to do LH testing via an ovulation kit to see when a person actually ovulates, because the Dutch test is meant to be done 5 days after ovulation. And then we have to do a med and supplement review because bioidentical hormones change the results on these tests. So we need to know what a person is taking and know the context of when they tested versus what hormones they're on. Just to make a few links to kind of bring it full circle with the career you're in. Estrogen dominance is very responsive to broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage. They're very good. Ground flax also is very good. Fiber is very good in general for binding up those estrogen metabolites in the colon. B vitamins help with the metabolism of estrogens. The adrenals need a lot of vitamin C and magnesium. They really do. And we're going to be relying on the adrenals for progesterone and testosterone production forever. So they need to be well supported. Then we have the blood sugar. So, like I said, a lot of people transitioning from high carb to low carb, high protein. It's a relevant thing to do because it helps with stability. I would suggest that we shot for 10 grams of fiber through fruits and vegetables and other fibers, 20 to 30 grams of protein, and 5 grams of healthy fats per meal for blood sugar stability. Bone and muscle, protein, vitamin D, calcium, K2. You know all about this. Strength training 3 times a week. It makes a big difference. We got to keep these bones healthy forever and ever. And we're only going to have a little bit of estrogen to work with. And then metabolism. So keeping metabolism as high as possible, benefiting from the afterburn from exercise. So some movement every single day, benefiting from the afterburn from meals, eating the right amount of meals, supporting digestion, supporting probiotics because they play a big role in metabolism, and sleeping through the night because we won't have as much estrogen and progesterone to support metabolic rate. We talked about the 3 types of estrogen dominance. Low progesterone is very, very common here. The dropping of progesterone before estrogen and people getting estrogen dominance with a poor ability to sleep. And progesterone can be life-changing. Actually getting bioidentical progesterone to support a high quality and quantity of sleep can be transformational here. Cortisol, flip or flat line. Are we getting high cortisol at night? That's a flip. Or are we getting flat line, burnout, low all the time? Alternatively, it could be high all the time. So assessing energy and stress responses is quite important, and maybe testing. And then low testosterone and DHEA. So for whole body wellness, we need these hormones for muscle maintenance, metabolism, blood sugar control, sex drive, mood. Thyroid hormone interplay. I've said that enough. Case 1, perimenopause. This is another case. Well, we can just make it the same case we already did. Irregular cycles, PMS, insomnia. 3 things coming in with. The labs show low luteal progesterone, estrogen dominance, high evening cortisol. So they're getting high evening cortisol at the same time as low progesterone. They can't sleep. It's a tough situation to be in. A common intervention here might be stress management techniques, a high level of magnesium before bed, cruciferous vegetables for the estrogen metabolism, and getting the right amount of protein. Excuse me, sorry. The outcome, better sleep, lighter cycles, mood improvement. Super relevant in perimenopause and very helpful. And can help to prevent the weight gain because elevated cortisol at night causes the body to dump glycogen from the stored carbohydrates in the muscles into the bloodstream, preventing fat burning. Cortisol is bad for fat burning. That's why we try not to have too much caffeine in the lower part of the day. We try not to have too much stress in the later part of the day. Really important. Next case is menopause. Hot flashes, weight gain, brain fog. 3 common things. Hot flashes, weight gain, brain fog. The labs showed low estrogen, flat progesterone, so not getting a bump in the second half of the cycle. Low DHEA, high fasting insulin. So becoming insulin resistant. And so a common intervention here might be strength training with protein, blood sugar approaches through nutrition, and some supportive adrenal care, right? Adaptogenic herbs, nutrient support to support that low DHEA production. I kind of like fenugreek here. Outcome, improved cognition, fewer hot flashes, weight stabilization. So if we weren't doing bioidenticals here, I really like fenugreek. I like rhubarb extract here, in addition to nutrient principles. You can see why this matters. The labs can explain the symptom chaos that a person might be experiencing, fluctuating hormones and fluctuating symptoms. By the way, these symptoms fluctuate with the hormones in perimenopause. Functional lens, we can get real life solutions here. There's actually something to do about these that helps. Nutrition and lifestyle plays a big role. And having the labs in front of you can build your confidence significantly. That's what people get from my course, is they go out there and they don't feel expert in one thing. They feel good in 100 things and ready to communicate. You've probably been in situations before. I've been there many times. People come in and they know all about a lab I've never heard of. And it's like, what? They're like, oh yeah, it came out 3 months ago. It's the best lab for this or that. this new Alzheimer's lab or something like that. And I'm like, oh gosh, like, darn it. This course is trying to prevent that from happening to you because it happens to me sometimes. Consider signing up for my course. I'm really grateful you attended today, anyways. But it's really fun. We have a good time. It's enjoyable. There's lots of communication, and I make myself available. There's only one assignment. It's easy, and it helps your career. Thanks for joining. Check out my podcast, Personalized, on all the platforms, and follow me on Instagram at DRDAVIDDUIZER, please. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's go to questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. There, and yeah, definitely go right ahead with the. Oh, I
I
think it was
almost
I
got
on
it.
mute or.
No, I think you're good. I almost got it in 45 minutes, 47 minutes. Not bad.
Yeah, no, that was really great. Yeah, no,
Okay,
I just
cool.
wanted to mention, like, no, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, and everyone here, just for your questions, you can put them either in the chat or in the Q&A. Either one of those works.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Theo. Okay,
Um,
so in the chat, we'll start here. It says, I can't see the name. I want to know the name. Hold on. Ray. For men, is estrogen levels still important for collagen formation? A little bit, but not much. Not much. So for men in the course, what we go through is the testosterone to estrogen ratio. Um, excuse me. So we're trying to keep a certain ratio. And within that ratio, estrogen should not be zero, but it should definitely not be too high. So we do that. And I'm not allowed to, I'm not permitted to prescribe testosterone, but in my practice, I support people going through TRT. And so my role here is kind of a big one. Like I'm the one doing the Dutch test and doing the testosterone to estrogen ratio using the blood samples every so often. And I work with a medical doctor and a pharmacist who actually run the program. And so ratio and not being zero in estrogen is how I like to approach it. And then the next person says, this person's name is Amanda. Thank you, Amanda, for the question. It says, how much fat? Okay. So not to, with my framework here for blood sugar stability, I'm not saying about the total amount of calories. You're probably adding up the grams of protein, fat, and carbs and thinking that's a low calorie meal. Yeah. It's not the whole meal. It's what needs to be included at least in a meal. And so I said 5 grams of healthy fat. So let's say you're having like a lower fat meal, like you're having a salad and not putting much fat on it, still put 5 grams, a teaspoon of olive oil on there to get that fat. But in a meal that's more fatty, still have 10 grams of fiber and 20 grams of protein. I hope that makes sense. So you've got this big meal, but you for sure had the framework set 10 grams fiber, 20 to 30 grams protein, 5 grams fat. We had a nice comment from Gabby saying, thank you so much. You're very welcome, Gabby. And then Lydia said, amazing. Thank you. Awesome. And then she also, no, Lacey said, is the consumption of rhubarb juice sufficient to assist hormones in the same way the extract is? I'm not familiar. Lacey, I'm so sorry. When I make that comment, I'm commenting on a guaranteed product for hot flashes that is that I use a lot in my practice, and I'm not supposed to say brand names in a course like this. But if you look up rhubarb extract products, there's a guaranteed one out there. You can contact the companies and figure out which one it is. But I don't know about rhubarb juice. I'd be very interested though, and I don't think it would be harmful to try rhubarb juice for hot flashes. Super interesting. And then we see Shauna, for women who have had uterinectomy, so hysterectomy, we follow the moon phases to determine cycle? Sorry, I'm looking around my camera stand here. Can we follow the moon phases? I'm not an expert in moon phases. I'm really sorry. Like some people are and they're amazing at it, and I like commend them, but I don't know. I have no idea. I know what you're talking about, but I'm not an expert. I'm sorry. The LH strips at Shoppers are like, 20 for $20 or whatever, and they just urinate on them, and it tells you if you're ovulating, or if they're high all the time. Then of course the ovaries are not responding. Then we have Amanda said, will you share a link for the class or email? I'll leave that one for you, Theo. About the signups for the class. And then Marianne says, is there a possibility of someone experiencing weight loss when someone has hypothyroidism while in the postmenopausal phase? Postmenopausal hypothyroidism, getting weight loss. Yeah, anything is possible. Anything's possible. Not very much not typical because, of course, metabolism slows in hypothyroidism. But some people go through periods of anorexia and not consuming, and they go through periods of malabsorption syndromes where they don't absorb nutrients, and that causes weight loss even in hypothyroidism. But I don't know how to tie it to postmenopause and if the hormones would have any role. This is wild. This is a great number of questions. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job. Okay. So Heather says, what is the most common hormonal issue that you come across as a clinician to know what's on the rise and most common to see in practice? Hot flashes and night sweats and estrogen dominance, like heavy cycles, significant PMS driven by high estrogen. That would be my answer, Heather. Pauline says, my sister is 29 years old of age, has PCOS, but was rectified, recently had her menstrual cycle thrice in a month. What should she do about this as it is abnormal? See a doctor. And there's a lot more to consider with a case where it has been 3 times in 1 month. We call it abnormal uterine bleeding likely. That needs to be assessed through hormone labs like the ones we discussed today. And so they'd likely run multiple labs throughout the next month to see what's happening. But I would say consult with a doctor because it's not normal. And also to get an iron check just to make sure that she's not going to come out really sick on the other side. And I wish her the best. If she wants to consult with me, she can call me and I can help her too. But they're probably going to put her through a lot of the same tests we talked about today. And then we have Pauline also asking, despite in menopause, I feel as if I have UTI symptoms. So what should I take to stop it? Can I carry out a candida cleanse? I'm sorry, Pauline, I don't know anything else about you. I can't give medical advice in a session like this. Yeah, sorry about that. But I would suggest that in menopause, it's quite common to get UTIs. And we talked about today the terrain, the estrogen, the local estrogen in the mucous membrane of those tissues, and how supporting that level can be very effective in prevention. But getting tests done for urinary tract infections for both the bacteria, and the white cells, which we cover in the course, and then deciding about the treatment from there, because there might be antibiotics required. And then Shauna says, so what do we do? Thank you. Shauna, I feel like maybe you're referencing the question you had before, which was for women who have had uterinectomy, can we follow the phases to determine the cycle? What do we do to determine the cycle? I assume. So those LH strips from the drugstore, they're called ovulation kit. You use those and they tell you the LH. It's an at-home test. The LH we talked about today, that can be done at home. Then we have Jessica questioning about your continuing ed course. How in depth would the training be on the Dutch testing? Are we equipped to then be a provider for the Dutch test, or is that a separate process? It's very in depth. In fact, we do about 3 hours on it if there's interest. One time we did a full session on it. Other times we haven't because there hasn't been as much interest. So we go very, very in depth if people are interested in that, which I am because I'm an expert on that one. And then but I can't sign you up for the lab. You have to contact the lab to get yourself signed up to be a provider. And I think it's one of the ones where you can be a provider. And then Juliana says, given the course covers many labs, is it correct understanding that it covers them all somewhat specifically and that the pace is fast, similar to this presentation? Number 2, in the course, will there be opportunities for discussion, or is it more presenter run and centered approach? Okay, so it's as slow as it needs to be. So we slow it down depending on where people are. Some people will want it faster, some people want it slower. So we find a nice balance, and it's all discussion. It's slides, discuss. Slides, discuss, questions intermingled. I try not to get off track too much. I try to just stay on track, but answer the questions as we go. And so it is totally based on the vibe of the community taking the course at that time. And it's very often, we're always cordial with each other, and we always find a nice rhythm. And I have a WhatsApp group where I answer questions outside of course. So I make myself available for anything that's missed. So it's like no brainer stuff. And then we have Marianne. Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, David. Great. You're welcome. Heather says, thank you so much. You're welcome. Um, Marcella says, would it be in the use to measure hormones in the postmenopausal women after more than 10 years of menopause? After more than 10 years of menopause, if they have symptoms, so hot flashes and night sweats, I think it's still helpful. And if they want to go for optimal estrogen levels for bone density support, I think it's still helpful. Then we have, okay, I'm going to skip over that one because someone's telling me again, Pauline's telling me about her medical history. Pauline, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. I wish I could. I wish I could. And Gabby says, which low minerals do you typically see in perimenopausal women? Low minerals in perimenopausal women. I don't know that there's a trend, other than most people are deficient in magnesium and don't know it yet. Linda says you did a fantastic condensed delivery of info. Very complex topic. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the Q&A. Is it possible to get the PowerPoint, Juliana? I'm sure they'll send it to you. Theo, you can answer that one later. Galit says, for the cruciferous veg, does it matter whether it's steamed, raw, cooked, etc.? Want to know the best form it should be. Good questions. We don't talk about treatment in the course. And I know there's a ton of debate about the how to cook these things. And I think a variety of ways can be valuable, but a lot of people who can't consume them raw because it impacts their digestion. Like they just can't do it. And so I don't put a whole lot of weight into it. I'm not super dogmatic. I don't think the research is amazing for one way of cooking it or another. And I usually like to have very straightforward answers, but for that one, I don't have it. Sorry. Elisa says, this was very helpful. Thank you. I will take the course in the future. Well, I look forward to meeting you, Lisa. Isabel says, how do you, about if you suspect MCAS, how is it diagnosed? Being also in menopause. Okay, so MCAS. Okay, you're going to ask a question about the hardest topic in integrative medicine. I love it, Isabel. I love the ambition there. It would take me another hour to talk about how to consider, so MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. I like a total IgE. I like a blood level of histamine. I like a histamine with a DAO. I like an infectious disease screen. Being also in menopause is relevant in the sense that I think that if cortisol is very high or the adrenals are not well supported, then maybe immune function will be worse, or immune dysregulation would be more pronounced. That's all I can do for now. I'm sorry. Jacqueline says, why is testosterone not recommended by mainstream medicine? Oh, good question. You'll have to ask them. Sorry, Jacqueline. You'll have to ask them. Carly says, hey, David, with fluctuating hormones during this time, do you feel that the Dutch test is worth our clients spending their money on it? Awesome question about the money. If the desire is suppressing hot flashes and night sweats with bioidentical hormone therapy, no test required. There's evidence-based protocols for bioidentical hormone prescribing that will cure the hot flashes and night sweats. If they want to know about what's optimal for their body in particular and what might be the best estrogen level and whether or not they're going to be supported with testosterone and preventing these from occurring, and if they have sufficient progesterone for deep sleep, then this test is going to tell us all that information. So it's more of an information gathering session rather than I need to know these levels to treat this one really terrible thing that's happening to me. So it's an option. I give an option. And then Sonia says, can men get hot flashes like women? Is it due to estrogen converted from testosterone? I don't know that. I don't know. In andropause, men can get a little more grumpy, but I think it's more the DHT testosterone. I've run out of time. I'm sorry, Theo. There's a few more questions. Do you have a few more minutes? Or
go ahead, yeah.
Am I okay for time?
Yeah, you're good. I'm good.
Yep. Okay. Juliana says, given the course covers many labs, I already answered that one. Time for discussions? Absolutely. Lisa says, can someone who's in menopause for at least 5 years still get hot flashes? Yes. Yes, Lisa. Milena says, thank you. I'm curious to know if you heard about women using GH in their favor in the perimenopause phase. I have not. I've only seen men using it for osteoporosis unexplained osteoporosis for GH. I'm not a GH expert, but that's where I've seen it used. Lydia says, how much protein a day do you recommend meat? Okay, I'm not a big meat or protein guy. I prefer everything to be pescatarian, vegetarian, lean meats at best, unless there's severe iron deficiency. But I typically recommend decimal 7.5 grams per pound of body weight. Isabel says, can you mix bioidentical hormones and adaptogens together? Yes, you may. Lydia says, you did a great job. Thank you so much. Lisa says, so you like rhubarb extract over black cohosh? I sure do. For that, not for progesterone support. I don't think either of them do a great job at progesterone support. Although black cohosh probably is used more in that vein, but rhubarb for hot flashes and black cohosh for progesterone. And Jacqueline says, do you see postmenopausal women once hormones have leveled out or new normal that women find it a bit easier to find a stable wellness schedule? Yes. Yes. So you're saying that they've gone down, they've gone through this, they've leveled out, and now things are more stable and it's easier? Yes. If one of you is going through this, you'll get through it. Very rare that someone is like 20, 30 years later and hasn't done any support and still has symptoms. It's very rare. Josephine is asking Theo a question, so I'll let Theo answer that. Jacqueline says, joint pain, what tests can be done? Does it fall in the low estrogen bucket? Yes, low estrogen can cause joint pain. That's very fair. Juliana's looking for the replay. That's for Theo. Gabby says, only if you have time. Do you have a comment on the value of bioidentical hormones over traditional synthetic hormone treatments? I'm a bioidentical guy. I like the studies better. I don't prescribe traditional synthetic. I only use bioidentical, but I'm a naturopath. So it may be just that. That's how I was trained. Juliana says, is it better to take your closer to graduation? I say that people are taking it all throughout some people when they're just starting the course, and some people 10 years after graduating, and really it won't make a whole lot of difference. And that's it. Other than there's 26 messages over here. Okay, there's a few more in this webinar chat that I'd love to go through.
Yep, all good.
The company, okay, so the next one is the company that does the Dutch test is called Precision Analytical. Can I have your WhatsApp number? You may not. I love that. Call my clinic. No, call my clinic. Hi, David. With fluctuating hormones during this time, do you feel that the Dutch test? Okay, we already talked about that one. Saliva testing for women postmenopausal. Is blood work always recommended, or can saliva be sufficient for measures of progesterone? Saliva can be sufficient as the baseline snapshot. Saliva can, absolutely. Has the age of perimenopause started to decrease in women? I'm not 100% sure. I don't think so. Dutch test prior to perimenopause to have a baseline starting, it won't make much difference. I don't think. Top 3 recommendations to make menopause the smoothest transition for women. Sorry, I can't give much advice on treatment. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I wish I could, because treatment is my favorite, but I don't get a chance to do a lot of that. I'll put my email in the chat. If you have more questions, you can message me. Okay, I have someone waiting for me, so I got to run. Thanks for all the questions. That was awesome. Goodness gracious. I really appreciate everyone getting
Wonderful.
into it there. If you need more support, email me.
Thank you so much, David. So for everyone, just stick around a moment. I'm just going to answer the couple questions that are about the logistical questions about the course. And then David said he's got to leave, but we'll do the giveaway as well. So stick around for that. We should only be a few more minutes.
Okay. See you, everyone. Stick around for the giveaway. You're welcome, everyone. Hope you had a good time. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. So the questions about the course I know many of you know, our continuing education courses are primarily designed for our graduates, people that are in the industry, CNPs, certified nutritional practitioners, but also other practitioners as well. That said, this course is a bit unique in that like Dr. David was saying, that you would benefit from it from other times as well. The more information you have under your belt, the more knowledge, etc., then of course, the better you'll be able to apply it. So someone taking it towards the end of our diploma program would be able to apply it more better than someone earlier, but you're not going to necessarily get less out of it. And by the time you're done the program and you've done this course, you'll have the same ability there. So regardless of what you're doing, yeah, that definitely works. But yeah, thanks so much for coming. It was a great webinar, I think. And hopefully see you on another one or speak to you soon.